who have been very instrumental in making this day possible, and it will be my pleasure to recognize them as and when they arrive. But for now, allow me to recognize the presence of the head of the African Evangelistic Enterprise team, the Reverend Engineer Paul Waswa, who is with us today. Engineer, we're very glad to have you and to be with you this evening. We also want to recognize the team from the Rabbi Zachariah International Ministries, RZIM. If you remember that team, please do us a favor of standing up and recognize you. You're very instrumental in making this happen. Thank you very much. We are putting just a few things together, and this should be able to kick off in about the next 2 minutes, exactly 5 p.m. Gideon Odoma is a Christian evangelist, is an apologist thinker, and is also a leadership expert. He's also a strategy consultant and an alumnus of the University of Jos and also the University of Oxford. He has the skill set to bridge the gap between the academia and the layman, making complex intellectual concepts accessible and engaging to the uninitiated. Apart from founding and leading Fortress Ministry, he is a trainer and strategist with notable organizations. He has helped emerging companies overcome startup inertia. He is a member of the training team for the Popular Youth Economic Summit, a youth empowerment movement. One of his burning desires is to see Africa shift from a consumer constituency to a producer bloc. As a Christian leader, he is passionate about presenting and defending the credibility of the Christian faith, and thus is a Christian apologist. In the marketplace of ideas, it is his chief joy to see people transformed by the power of love, by the power and love of Jesus Christ. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure now to welcome to this debate Gideon Odoma. Gideon, we are very glad to have you and feel comfortable. Welcome to Uganda.
Thank you.
Surumani Manzi is a man that I have personally known for a very long time. He didn't tell me to say this, but I will say it anyway. One of the most revered head prefects in our days at Ntare School. He's a practicing construction manager, a Ugandan of strong Pan-African sentiment. He's a vocal anti-theist, a published poet, and a short fiction writer. His assorted thoughts are available at Solomon Manzi.blogspot.ug, where he blogs infrequently. And Surumani Manzi will be discussing, together with Gideon Odoma, our major theme this evening, whether there is life of a meaning and purpose without God. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure now to welcome Surumani Manzi. Surumani, we are very glad to have you, and we look forward to your thought-provoking engagement. Ladies and gentlemen, the format of this debate or this discussion will run across a time thread that we are going to talk about. The two gentlemen will have opening speeches of 15 minutes each, and they will be talking about exactly what they think about the topics that were given to them. There will be a rebuttal speech from each of the speakers that will last 7 minutes for each speaker, and that means 14 minutes. We shall also have a session for cross-examination in which the speakers will engage one another on the different questions that have been triggering on their minds. We will have concluding speeches of 5 minutes each, and finally we will have question and answers from the moderator and also the audience. So if you have any questions for any of the gentlemen, please make sure that you forward them to the people who will be receiving them. We are working hand in hand with Makerere Debating Union, which is led by my brother and friend Emmanuel Luaga. And Emma and Patrick and Samantha, together with Joel, who are the heads of the... Please, let me see those people put up their hands so that we understand. So Emmanuel, Patrick, Joel and Samantha will be taking questions from the audience. So if you have it, put it on paper, and then they will forward them to me. Without wasting too much time, it's 2 minutes past 5 p.m. Our first speech of the evening will come from our very own, a former student of this university, as we have already talked about him, Surumani Manzi.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. I am deeply gratified by the opportunity to stand before you and help to unravel perhaps a subject of discussion which is as contentious and controversial as it is divisive. I hope that at the end of this particular discourse, we shall not be faced with a situation where things degenerate to a fist fight. Because I am more than sure perhaps that I am outnumbered. I would also like to take this opportunity to welcome my brother, Emeka, Odoma, you're welcome, to Uganda, called by one of our venerable colonial masters, Winston Churchill, the Pearl of Africa. I think he was right about that, at least we can agree with our former imperial masters on a few things. I can assure you that your physical safety is guaranteed. Unlike, of course, many of your countrymen, unfortunately, who have been butchered in that country south of the Limpopo in the past few days. We are in sympathy and commiseration with them. However, concerning the safety of your beliefs, I'm not too sure I can guarantee that being at the very forefront of the army that will be putting a sword to them. All right. Before I launch into the arguments that I have arrayed for this opening speech, I would like to conduct a very simple social experiment. And I hope you will cooperate, if not allow me to convert you, at least cooperate. How many of us, by show of hands, support the same political party that our parents support? You share the same political views with your parents. How many? Okay, about 5 hands, all right. How many share the taste in fashion or dress code with your parents? You wear the same clothes that your mother or father wears? All right, how many support the same football team? All right, okay, the numbers are astonishingly small. Okay, then how many, and I hope I will not be arrested by the Reverend Father Lokodo for this, how many prefer the same sex position that our parents prefer? Well, we can all guess that our parents prefer one very famous one called the missionary style. I'm not sure if it's the Church Missionary Society that introduced it, or maybe the African Evangelical Enterprise. But anyway, that was just a light moment. But the point I'm trying to make here is, if you can at least agree that your parents would be wrong on certain things, such as dress code and favorite food and political views, perhaps I should ask a follow-up question. How many of us have converted from one religion to another, at least once in your lifetime? Converted from one religion to another? Okay, that's 3. Still astonishingly small. Okay, so many of us basically follow the religion of our parents, the religion of our birth. Yes? Okay? It's very true. Okay, so if you can agree that your mother or father is wrong on certain things like political opinion or what they think about football, then why is it so difficult for you to agree that they could be wrong with regard to the faith system that they have indoctrinated you into? All right, that's food for thought for you. Maybe the second part of that would be, how many of us are Christians, confessed Christians? Confessed Christians? All right, thank you. That means that you believe that the Quran is a fabricated book, yes? Is there any Christian who believes that the Quran is the perfect word of God? Show of hands. That Muhammad is his holy prophet? And last, that the 5 pillars of Islam are a guarantee for you to gain access to heaven? Anybody? No one. Okay. So essentially you are atheists with regard to Islam. You find Islam a forgery in both practice and preachment, yes? Then why is it difficult for you to extend that same logic and question your Christian or Hindu beliefs or Buddhist beliefs, if we have any among this audience, all right? So I start out with that proposition. The idea that atheists are indeed a separate category that ought to be lambasted and stigmatized is one that should be subjected to as much scrutiny as interrogation. Each and every one of us, by subscribing to any single given faith, is automatically declaring themselves an atheist to the other 99% and more, all right? Statistics put the number of religions in the world currently at about 10,000, all right? And the number of gods probably more, taking into account polytheistic faiths, all right? So out of the 10,000 known religions in the world, you only belong to one, okay? And of that one, you only belong to a single denomination of the 1 out of 10,000. Christianity alone has about 33,000 denominations, all right? So for you to claim that your particular religion, not only but also the particular denomination in that religion is the truth and nothing but the absolute truth is rather arrogant, and if I may be allowed to say, it is a little sanctimonious. All right, that is out of the way. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, what is the essential atheist position? The atheist position has never been this, and I'm sure I will be disabusing many of this misconception when I inform you. The atheist position has never been that we claim to prove that God does not exist, or indeed we disprove the existence of God, corollary speaking. The atheist position has always been to assert that there is no substantive evidence, and that is the key word I want you to keep in mind at the end of this discussion. The atheist position has been that there is no evidence to believe in an intervening God, at least. The level of creating God and supervising God may be subject for another discussion, but as I will be explaining, the atheist position is not that we cannot prove the inexistence of God, or rather we can prove the inexistence of the same. So ladies and gentlemen, the discussion tonight therefore must focus on my opponent providing evidence for why this intervening God, who cares who you sleep with, who cares what food you eat, who cares what you wear, and on what day of the week, why belief in that particular God is justified. Not belief in the God who created the universe, because none of us were present when the universe was being created after all. So that is a falsifiable argument. The argument from, rather it is unfalsifiable, excuse me. The argument from cosmology is unfalsifiable. None of us was present. We can always have theories and say the Big Bang started it all and It is still going on. We can look through the Hubble Space Telescope and prove that, but it is a theory at the end of it. So we cannot disprove the existence of a creating God or a supervising God indeed. Who knows, maybe there's a pink elephant up in the solar system watching over everything we're doing here and about to determine whether I should be struck with a bolt of lightning or not for my very impious and unrighteous statements. But we cannot prove that, okay? As long as that pink elephant is deemed invisible, as indeed the Christian God is deemed invisible. All right. Therefore, there are only three ways to argue for the existence or indeed for a belief in this intervening God, the one of theism. The God who creates is the pantheistic God. The God who supervises, creates and supervises is the deistic God. But the God who creates, supervises and intervenes in the most petty and most capricious human action is the theistic God, and that is the God that we are calling to question this afternoon. I hope I have made that clear and it will not be controversial later on. Okay, so the first mode of argument that is adopted in arguing for belief in this theistic God, number one, is that this belief can be socially useful, all right? The utilitarian argument that believing in God helps us to do good works, it helps us to have an institution where we can come together once a week and worship, it helps us to be charitable and kind. That is the first mode of argument. The second mode of argument is to argue that the atheistic position is amoral, if not immoral. It is to put forward the argument that without a belief in God, then what stands between human society and dystopia or utter chaos? All right? I will be responding to that argument as well. And then thirdly, it is to put forward the idea that your particular denomination, in addition to your particular religion, is the only right one and all the rest are wrong. I hope I have responded to that sufficiently, at least if not fully. All right, now, the first question, is religion useful? Does religion provide a basis for morality that a secular paradigm or a secular worldview cannot hope to ever match? Without the fear of God, rather, and indeed the associated fear of hell, eternal torment in hell, is it impossible for us to be good, or for us to be altruistic, or for us to be generous, or for us to be charitable? I find that those two questions, if responded to properly, will lead us to understand that morals actually predate religion. None of us looks at the Ten Commandments before thinking of what to do, say, or indeed act out. You know, morality is something that is ingrained in us. It is passed down from generation to generation, premised upon revolutionary pressures. And indeed, morality is not something absolute. It is something relative. What would you say to the Christian soldier? I just have about 5 minutes more. All right. What would you say to the Christian soldier who is at the battlefront fighting in a war to which they have been sent by their military superiors? Are they committing murder? Are they contravening the injunction not to commit murder as per the Decalogue or Ten Commandments? Remember that they may well be shooting against a fellow Christian in the enemy army. So what exactly is the absolute morality of that action? Unless you like to say Gideon, and those of you who will be on his side, that soldiers are by definition going to hell because they are professional murderers. No offense meant to anyone with a father or a sibling who is in the army. They are very honorable servicemen for our country. All right. There are millions of non-religious charities across the world, and what they exceed at doing, which the religious charities do not do, is that they simply act out of goodwill for their fellow human beings, fellow Homo sapiens. They do not seek to proselytize or evangelize fast before they can extend their goodwill to victims of any disaster or any situation that is man-made. And they also do not do it because they expect a reward. They do not do it because they expect to go to heaven and live happily ever after. Therefore, I find that the argument that religion is useful is baseless, and the argument indeed that religion is the only source of morality is also largely ungrounded. Now, finally, the argument that Christian faith, indeed a particular denomination of Christianity, in this case my opponent and interlocutor, is a plenipotentiary of evangelical Christianity, which is a very recent phenomenon as far as denominations go. What makes that denomination more special than Roman Catholicism, than Jehovah's Witnesses, than Mormons, than any of the other 33,000 denominations of Christianity that exist under the sun? What makes it so special? What makes it unique? What makes it the only path to eternal life in heaven or in paradise, and failure to accept of which would lead to eternal torment on earth? Maybe the last, rather second last or penultimate argument I would like to make is, was Jesus, who is indeed the main prophet and Messiah of evangelical Christianity, was he the Son of God? That is definitely up for contention. If one can disprove that Jesus at least was not the Son of God as per available evidence, not as per belief or illusion or indoctrination in Sunday school, but as per available evidence and logical reasoning, then perhaps one could have fully and perhaps conclusively debunked the idea that that evangelical Christianity is baseless. So there have been several other virgin births apart from that of Jesus, since that is the first and perhaps holiest miracle. Was Jesus born of a virgin? There are people like Buddha, who is the central prophet in Buddhism, Plato, Genghis Khan was king of the Mongols, the Egyptian god Horus perhaps is the archetype from which the Jesus myth was plagiarized and stolen by the nomadic and Semitic people that call themselves the Hebrews. Horus, for your information, was born of a virgin called Mary. An angel was there to appear to his mother before his birth. There were shepherds at his birth. He was crucified between two thieves. This is Horus, 3,000 years before Christ and about 2,000 years before Abraham came into the picture. He was baptized at the age of 30. He was baptized and was later beheaded. Many other seemingly curious coincidences. I beg that you think on them, and I hope that I can carry on from there during the rebuttal. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Surumani Manzi. Very, very intriguing thoughts. And on that note, I will ask the people from the Makerere debating union, the people I talked about, to please show themselves. Joel and Emma, Patrick and Samantha, please stand up so that whoever has their questions can direct them to you. Joel and Emma are outside, but the gentleman at the back in a white shirt is Patrick. He will be taking questions from the audience. So put them on a piece of paper, any question you have for the two gentlemen. Without a belief in God, what stands between anarchy and harmony? Without religion or God, is there a way to ensure a moral nation? Is religion or an intervening and supervising God a moral compass? And what about the question of evangelical Christianity? Was Jesus the Son of God? Perhaps the most fundamental question for any Christian here. Was Jesus the Son of God? It's my pleasure now to invite Gideon or Odoma to come and defend the position of those who believe and trust in the Holy Spirit.
Good evening to you all this evening. My name is Gideon Ekele Odoma. As you can tell, I am Nigerian, and I'm from Nigeria. I've been having a little bout with cold. My nostrils have been congested, but I hope you can hear me nonetheless. I'll try to speak up as much as I can. It's a huge honor for me to be here to partake in this discourse and exchanges. I want to thank the Debating Union and all the other organizations that have made this little interaction possible. I want to thank every one of you. And I hope that at the end of our time today, we would have been poised to better understand the positions from which we are coming. That's part of why we do this kind of discourse, is to further and to enhance understanding. And that is particularly why the university was set up in the first place, supposed to be a marketplace of ideas, where people come to show not the strength of their muscles, but the superiority of their ideas. And so, to that extent, I feel also very safe here tonight, because whereas you can look at the Christian non-theist divide, you can also look at the Ugandan non-Ugandan divide. And if you look at it that way, I'm also heavily outnumbered. But I take solace in the fact that it's an intellectual environment. Where I come from in Nigeria, some of these discussions are not very easy to have, particularly the part of the country where I come from. Like he just said, before I got to Abuja on my way to coming to Uganda, I had to drive through southern Kaduna. And I didn't even know that there was curfew. So there was 24-hour curfew, and I drove right straight into it. So there's trained military-looking men, and a lot of people were already serving punishment when I got there in my car. So my excuse that day was, I'm not aware this is happening, and they said, well, you know, there's been a lot of killings here, and so movements have been banned. So I can tell you firsthand the horrors that have been caused in our world by religion. My wife has not always been a Christian. My wife is a Muslim background believer, and because of her faith as a Christian, she's had to be excommunicated from her family till date as we speak. So I live with the reality of what I'm about to talk about this afternoon or this evening. But I want to draw attention to some very important facts this evening. Number one, this argument or this debate basically is about the possibility of having life, of having meaning and purpose in life if God does not exist. So because of time, during the rebuttals, I'm going to be responding to some of the comments that Manzi has made. I really look forward to that, but at least I want to run through my opening comment first. You see, it was Dr. Masmuru, and he was very apt when he said that when the purpose of a thing is not known, abuse becomes inevitable. He makes a point that appears very commonsensical, but you see, you could even consider it banal. But when you look at what Masmuru is saying reflectively, you realize that he is making a very huge claim. For instance, what's the meaning of life? What's the value of life? And what's the purpose of life? I doubt if there's anybody here that hasn't asked that question at one point or the other in your life. Sometimes ago I watched a movie, I can't remember the name exactly now, but there's this line in one of the songs that was sung in that movie that has refused to leave me. It says, on and on. Does anybody know what we are living for? On and on. Does anybody know what we are living for? This line from this song, it's been a long time I watched that movie, but it won't leave me. And the question of life's meaning is one of the oldest perplexities that is known to thinking human beings. Tonight, it is this ancient contention, this ancient query, this ancient question is the subject of our discussion. So the contention in tonight's debate is whether life has meaning and purpose and value without God. Clearly, we are trying to consider, does life have meaning and purpose and value without God? And of course, as you already know, you know what my position is. My position is that without God, life has neither meaning nor purpose. You see, every word in that statement is very vital to my case, because that's why I chose them to start with. I want to proceed to show that ultimately, if God does not exist, life has no meaning, life has no value, and life has no purpose. That's my enterprise tonight. But you see, if on the other hand, life has ultimate and objective meaning, value, and purpose, it does so only insofar as God exists, at least. And you're going to have more than God in existence to be able to possess life with meaning and purpose and value. And I'll explain that in a bit. So, but to further clarify before I proceed, my position is not that people cannot choose what meaning and value and purpose they would like to enunciate and pursue for themselves. No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm defending is something more fundamental, something more grand than that. It is my contention that whatever fanciful or frightening meaning and purpose or reason a person may choose to donate to himself, it is only relative to that person. You see, eventually it becomes that person's private meaning and purpose. It is not really the meaning and the purpose of life objectively. That's the point. The point is that if God does not exist, life does not have meaning objectively and ultimately. If God does not exist, life does not have a purpose. If God does not exist, that question that is captured in that line from that song, in that movie that I've now forgotten, which is on and on, does anybody know what we are living for? That question remains unanswered and unanswerable unless you posit God. Because like I have said, it's possible for you to think of reasons for yourself. You can craft the meaning of your own life. But that's just subjective. It's relative. That isn't really, objectively speaking, what would be the meaning of life. Now, so, if, for instance, I'm Nigerian, as you already know. I'm Nigerian, but I've come to love a Ugandan delicacy called chapati. I hope I got it well. Yeah, chapati is my best Ugandan meal. Yes, I love it, I love it. Now, I've come to love this delicacy called chapati. Now, imagine if I walked into your house and realized that you had just prepared half a dozen pieces of chapati. My love for chapati cannot necessarily be the explanation for the meal you have prepared. I can't say, well, you made this chapati because I love chapati. No. My love for chapati cannot be the explanation, not necessarily, for the chapati you've made. Neither will my understanding of how chapati is made explain why you chose to prepare the treat. You see, notice, there is a how question and there is a why question. And I'll come back to it in a bit, but follow me. You see, the only way I'm going to know why you made a chapati is to ask you. Isn't that commonsensical? There's no way I'm going to know why you made the chapati without asking you. I might know how to make chapati, but knowing how to make chapati does not explain why you made the chapati. If God, as the transcendent, immaterial, spaceless, enormously powerful, loving creator of the universe does not exist, then who will tell us why anything rather than nothing exists at all, or why we are here? Who is there to tell us? The chapati cannot give the explanation for its own existence. You have to look outside of the chapati in order to find the explanation for the existence of the chapati. In the same manner, I'm asking, if there is nothing transcendental, if there's nothing beyond us, if time plus space plus matter plus chance is all that is behind the cosmos, the universe, then who is there to tell us why we are here? And don't forget, the matter for contention tonight is, does life have a meaning or purpose if God does not exist? That's the contention tonight. And I'm saying that we may know through our advancements in mathematics and in physics and in cosmology and in sundry sciences a lot about how the universe works. But none of those noble disciplines can tell us the first things about why the universe is here.
Physics can tell you a few things, or a lot of things, about how the universe works. But physics cannot answer the why question. It is this deeper why question that is the question of meaning and purpose. And ladies and gentlemen, this why question is the subject of tonight's debate. I want to delineate for you two issues and break them down as quickly and as comprehensively as I can. Number one, wow. This is not a God debate necessarily. Therefore, the existence of God is not the primary focus of tonight's project. Nevertheless, because my position is that life has meaning and purpose, my position necessarily assumes God's existence. So let me therefore state that the existence of the universe itself requires a transcendent creator. In all of our experiences as human beings, everything that begins to exist has a cause for its existence. In order to say that the universe exists, begins to exist because we already know now from science that our universe came into existence about 13 billion years ago at what is now being popularly called the Big Bang. Now, for the Big Bang to have happened, I mean, there has had to be a banger, you know? Because whatever begins to exist must have an explanation for its existence. I'm just trying to say that it's not difficult to see how that we can believe in the existence of a transcendent being that is beyond and outside of our universe, at least. There are other reasons and evidences to believe that God exists, but I must move on to my next point, especially that this is not a God debate. Number two, what would be the basic requirement if life is to have meaning and purpose, and what would be the consequences of denying the reality of those requirements? To begin with, two major factors are required in order for life to have meaning and value and purpose, and they are God and immortality. If you don't have God and you don't have immortality, you cannot have meaning and you cannot have purpose in life, ultimately speaking. You cannot. You see, without God and immortality, death is the end. If death is the end, then it means life has no ultimate meaning or value or purpose, because it means, you know, the serial rapist who was never caught, he was just lucky in life. He suffers no punishment for his crime, not in this life and not after this life. Because if God does not exist, death is the end. It means that the wicked person and the good person, ultimately, it makes no difference. Or you might say, but well, you know, they made a difference in the life of other people while they live. But the point is, those other people also are destined to the same fate. They also are going to die, and when they die, that's going to be the end. Oh, and listen to me, it gets even worse than that. Scientists have told us that our universe, on average, is expanding. What that means in simple English is that this universe is not eternal, neither in the past nor in the future. So, by the scientific evidence of today, our universe is also going to die someday. So, it's not only that the human beings that live within the world, who have done either good or bad, are just going to meet their end when they die. It is that the universe itself someday is not going to exist anymore. So, the point is, what's the meaning of it all? What difference would it have made if the universe existed or if it didn't exist at all? So you see, the moment you put God and immortality out of the question, death is the end. And if God does not exist and death is the end, there is no meaning whatsoever, there is no purpose whatsoever, and there is no value, ultimately speaking, to life. Thank you very much.
I don't know what you're thinking right now, but I believe that the thoughts are moving through our heads and minds. And I'm glad, because this is the reason why we had this discussion. The reason why I keep referring to the Makerere Debating Union actually as being a partner in this initiative is that Sulumani Manzi was the founder of the Makerere Debating Union. And we are very glad to have him. Allow me also to recognize the presence of eminent people among us. Dr. Daniel Ruweza, a lecturer at the School of Law, and also the president of the Uganda Christian Lawyers Fraternity. We are very humbled to have him in this place. And also, I saw Engineer Moses Kulaba co-working. I don't know if he's still around. Okay, Engineer Moses Kulaba co, also the head of laity of St. Francis Chapel, the People's Warden, and he's also here. Again, allow me to recognize the presence of the partners of Rabbi Zacharias International Ministries who have made this possible and with which Gideon partners. If they are around again, I ask that they stand up for recognition. The partners of Rabbi Zacharias. Yes, and as I earlier said, the African Evangelistic Enterprise led by Engineer Reverend Paul Waswa. Very glad to have you here. This gets better. My analysis of the discussion is that we have people asking whether there is meaning and purpose to life without the existence of God. And essentially Gideon's contention was that the universe and science and all the theories may answer the how question, but they may never answer the why question. Does science really answer the why question? And my analysis of Surumani's submission was that, is there actually a supervising and intervening God? Is there such a thing as a God who is interested in the affairs of men? And we shall have, in the next 14 minutes, 7 minutes for each speaker, a rebuttal speech. And at this juncture, people will begin picking questions. There are these pieces of paper given to each one of us. Behind them is where you can have a question for either of the speakers, and also comments on the same discussion we have had. So these papers are going to be given to each one of us. And we are going to have rebuttal speeches from each one of them. I will take So we shall keep in the order we were in. Surumani will be the first to give a rebuttal speech to what Gideon just said. And after that, Gideon will come and say the same. I will not, immediately after Surumani, Gideon will come in. I will not come back here except to answer questions. Thank you very much.
Once again, esteemed moderator, thank you. Venerable audience, it's my pleasure to respond to some of the very intriguing and mentally stimulating arguments that have been mooted by my colleague and fellow African, at least we share that much, Mr. Ekene. All right, what is the possibility of finding meaning in life without God in the picture? I will put forward two anecdotes to try and respond to this seemingly strong but not really strong contention. Napoleon, many of you know him for his military exploits, was also a pretty naive thinker, really. One of the leading scientists in his day, physical scientists, approached him having assembled a model, some kind of prototype of a heliocentric universe. A universe in which the sun is the stars are the centers of the solar system, just like our sun, which is a great star, is the center of our solar system. And he went to him and said, look, Emperor, of course, during those days, the emperors, the political heads were also coincidentally or simultaneously the heads of the church. So he said, Emperor, the model that I have here seems to work based on gravitational orbiting and revolution of the planets about the sun and all these things. And so he went into details explaining how this model works. And then at the end of it all, the most intelligent question that Emperor Napoleon, may he rest in pieces, for what he did, at least to the Haitians, if nothing else. So Emperor Napoleon asked him, where is God in all this? And the very meek and frightened scientists say, but Emperor, you do not need God for the system to work, it just works. Alright? Okay, then a similar anecdote was St. Julian of Louvain. Louvain is a city in Switzerland, I think, in the Alps. Approached the Pope at that time, I forget, must have been a Julian or a John, one of the many names that many of these so-called descendants of St. Peter take on. He approached the Pope and told him about his theorization concerning the Big Bang and said, I think that this is how it all started. It started with an explosion, there was helium and hydrogen somewhere, there was a source of energy, could have been some bolts of lightning, and they led to a chemical reaction, and then these lighter elements fused and formed heavier elements, their atoms were split and things like that. Eventually planets were formed, and this is how it works, and it's going on endlessly. And so the Pope said, all right, that's good. Do you want me to teach it, or rather to label it as church dogma so that we can teach it that way, and every Catholic must believe it since this is what you have found out? The reason I am giving that anecdote is to illustrate the difference between the scientific and philosophical method and the lack of method there is in religion. Religion is premised more on dogma than on any logical or rationally consistent process. All right? Now, back to the issue of meaning. What meaning is there in the life of a zebra except to be devoured by a lion? And what punishment is ever given to the lion for devouring the zebra? None, ladies and gentlemen. So the idea that we cannot have meaning affixed to life simply because there is no God in the picture is limited, as per the arguments of my opponent, simply because animals lower than humans, very proud primates we are not believed to have souls in Christian theology. So if a lion has no soul and a zebra has no soul, what happens in the context of the law of the jungle? And we know all these things are happening throughout the natural world, throughout the biological world. You know, we have predators and we have prey, and prey must live all their lives striving not to be a meal, and to predators, it's a single individual of a prey eaten, it's just an extra meal for them, but there is simply no justice, no meaning in that context. So why do we limit it to just a primate species like us simply because we have a bigger brain, though we are just half a chromosome away from the chimpanzee and the gorilla? Why do we limit this imputation of meaning outside of the Darwinian or biological paradigm and framework of thought to just us? Why this speciesism? All right, it's a form of marginalization and discrimination. At this point, I am advocating for the rights of the other species. All right, look at some of these things, perhaps to allow you to think further on these issues. Before we were born, which I believe is not more than 70 years ago, at least for the elders in this audience, before we were born, the earth existed. Society went on, wars were fought, people fell in love, people died, others were born and died. It's not impossible to imagine that the world was in existence and was going ahead before we were born, yes? Then why is it possible to imagine that it will be in existence and go on after we are out of the picture? After all, we are not planning to be here more than 100 years, or 200, all right, 100 is probably a lower estimate. Let's say 200, all right? So it is very possible for the world to go on and for people to have meaning in their lives and for us to have debates like this and for men to court women and to marry them and to have children without any of us in the picture. As we are speaking, when the sun sets today, 19 mothers will have died giving life in this country. All right, just in this country alone, this small former British colonial mandate, 19 women will have died giving birth. Will the world stop because they have died? Definitely not. All right, so this whole idea that meaning can only be derived from the existence of not just a pantheistic or a deistic God, but also a theistic God, is just as illusory as it is indefensible. And then finally, perhaps on a lighter note, Brother Ekeme, chapati doesn't have a brain. And chapati doesn't have a nervous system. Chapati does not have the ability to reason these things out. So the analogy of a chapati, petty as it may sound, I think is a little misguided. Perhaps on a brighter note, chapati is a national symbol here. So, you know, excellent choice of favorite dish. Huh? You know, at least a version of chapati. It's called a Rolex patty. It's essentially a chapati just dressed up fancily. But yeah, that would be my submission. Perhaps on a final note, these would be some sobering statistics. Since the advent of life on this earth, which scientists put at about 3 billion years, I was listening to a BBC program and some scientists at the University of Toronto, I think in Canada, say they found fossils in a cave in Canada, puts it an extra 1.3 billion years further. So that's about 4.3 billion years essentially since life emerged on the earth from that original soup. 99.9% of the species that have ever existed have gone extinct. 99.9% of the species. And every second, according to our time count, to our temporal scale, a sun dies somewhere in the universe. A great star the size of our sun dies every single second. All right? And then in 2 million years, if you look through the Hubble Space Telescope, in about 2 million years from today, there is going to be a great collision between our own galaxy, the Milky Way, and the Andromeda galaxy. All right, that's a very sobering thought. Nothing that anyone says can prevent it. Nothing short of a miracle. Maybe God will intervene and divert the courses of these galaxies. But within 2 million years, approximately, the Andromeda galaxy is going to collide with this Milky Way galaxy. I do not know whether it's Allah or Jehovah or Yahweh or Buddha that will save us. Maybe they will choose to put aside their differences and come together and form a united front against the galaxy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Manzi. It's quite interesting some of the lines that he was towing them. Now, for the records, what we are looking at tonight is, does life have meaning and purpose if God does not exist? There's so many things that we can talk about. We can do this debate over and over again on an array of subjects, but I like to stay on course. Now, if you followed what I said initially, I'm saying that people come, people go, but that's not the whole picture. I'm saying your life does not have ultimate meaning and ultimate purpose if God does not exist. And I want to add a few more points to the points I've made already. Number one, remember I said to you that this universe, according to the scientific consensus today, which he has also buttressed, this universe is not going to be here forever. So even the universe that has given us opportunity to emerge or evolve, whatever you want to say, even that universe is not going to be here forever. So that the point at which you want to say, you know what, there's going to be this progression in our evolution, in goodness and all of that. So I want to contribute my own bit to it, that even when I'm no longer there, that which I have done can contribute to the flourishing of the human race. I'm saying that the future is bleak. The universe itself will die someday. And when it does happen, what would have been the point of everything that you did seemingly to contribute to the flourishing of the human species or of creation as a whole? That's the real point. Outside of God and immortality, there's no meaning. It's purposeless. Actually,
when you took the evolutionary line, like he was saying, if you take that as your only narrative for understanding why we are here, if you take evolution as the only narrative, let me tell you a few things which you already know. The goal of evolution is not truth, for instance, it's just survival, the survival of the fittest. Alright? The survival of the fittest. And just like he said, when the lion goes after, or prey, goes after a zebra and brings it down and mauls it, nobody says the lion has done a bad thing. You don't say the lion has done the wrong thing. Now, if we and the lions, if we're in the same category, if all that we are is a bundle of nerves and veins and bones and all of that, why the special pleading for the human race? So why am I not allowed to follow through with my natural instinct? You say, well, you know, socially we've agreed, this is the only way that our species can continue. But remember what I just said? Why do we need to continue? It's going to end someday nonetheless. So why should I be committed to the continuity of the human species? Why? Why? Ultimately, there's no point. And if there's no point, what is there to stop me from following through with my animalistic instinct? If God does not exist, a lot of the things that we talk about today, that we stand for, the social causes that we protect and that we propound, are completely baseless. The truth of the matter is, the person that does not believe in the existence of God has to borrow a lot in order to live a life that seemingly appears coherent. For instance, there is no need to talk about gender equality, for instance, in a purely naturalistic world where evolution is all that there is. If a man is stronger than a woman, why not go ahead and subjugate her? What makes it wrong? What makes it wrong? So where does the idea of having to work together for, you know, for the equality, for the betterment of society, where does all of that come from? Because where does it all lead to? If everything ends when we die, then the best use of your time is to be as selfish as you possibly can within the brief and bleak period that you are allowed to exist on this blip that we call the earth. Because the moment you are dead, everything that you enjoy before you die is everything that you have. So if God does not exist, the goal of every individual will be the maximization of the now. Because ultimately it ends in nothing. So the argument from the naturalistic point of view actually should be my argument. I should be the one saying, you know what, we don't say the animal has done something wrong, the lion has done something wrong when it goes after a prey. That's what it does. Where did this idea of oughtness, where does it come from? You ought not to. Where does it come from? In the animal world, what is. But among human beings, what is necessarily isn't, because sometimes we talk about oughtness. What is ought not to be. And so we say it is wrong. Inside of everybody sitting down here this afternoon, there is this settled knowledge. There is a knowing, wholly apart from religion, like he was trying to mention, on account of which you know that certain things are intrinsically wrong. Certain things are intrinsically wrong, and certain things are objectively right. Okay? And it cuts across nature, it cuts nations, across ethnicity. And you see, it's only in the Christian faith, for instance, that you can have an explanation for the commonality of our moral consciousness as a human species. Because within the narrative of the Christian worldview, we believe that every human being was made in the image of God. That's why it's not surprising, for instance, that what you want to call the golden rule basically runs across all cultures. And I've heard people use that as a way to talk down Christianity and say, you know, it was copied, it was borrowed. But no, it's actually the Christian's argument, because I, as a Christian, am the only one that have a justifiable explanation for that reality in history. And it is that because every human being is an image bearer of God, there is something of God in the heart of every human being. That's why, even wholly apart from relationships between cultures and civilization, we tend to share at the core, a unified moral code, a unified moral conviction. Even among bandits, even among armed robbers, they still have a sense of fairness. When they are done robbing on the highway, there is a formula by which they share the spoils of their robbery. And when you violate that, you would have committed an offense. That moral instinct, are you with me? That moral instinct that we share wholly apart from our commitment to the belief in God or not is explainable only on the basis that we know that every human being is an image bearer of God. And because of that, something of God eternally resides in your soul. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together again for our speaker. We really need to run through this program, and it could get hotter in here, it could get more cold, I don't know. Depends on which and from which perspective you are. But right now we'll give 5 minutes each for the speakers to cross-examine one another. And we are going to allow them to ask the hard questions, the easy ones too. I am very sure it's not going to get, messy in here, but we'll try. We'll try. And please keep the questions coming. The team from the Makerere Debating Union, please keep receiving the questions from the audience. After their cross-examination, I have been guided to allow only 2 verbal questions from the audience. Only 2 verbal questions. And it is going to be at the discretion of the moderator. These are the only powers I have today. Yeah. So we'll allow Surumani and Gideon to cross-examine each other. 5 minutes each for their questions. There could be a follow-up question. They're already prepped on what to do. So, I don't know who goes first, but Surumani seems like he's being the first in everything today, so he'll go first. Thank you.
Well, I'm not too sure if I would come first if the debate were put to an election. After all, democracy is never always fair, anti-Christian as it is. All right, God is a dictator, isn't he? None of us had to vote for him or for any of his prophets. All right, okay. Mr. Moderator, I would like to ask for some guidance. How are we going to do this? Should we do it Socratically? Does question answer immediately? All right. Oh, you have a mic, huh? All right. Mr. Kemi, what is the ultimate reward of the Christian faith?
Hello. All right. That is a very interesting question. The ultimate reward of the Christian faith.
Yeah, what's the trophy? What's the trophy for being a Christian?
You see, like the old confessional said, the goal of man on the face of the earth is eventually to know God, to love God, and to enjoy Him forever. Like I said, remember, if you don't ask the person that set any process in motion, you can never tell why he set it in motion. So in order to know what is our ultimate reward, we've got to ask the person that we believe set the motion, set the project in motion. And the goal of God for man, not just for the Christian.
If I may interrupt you there. I mean goal in terms, you say it is to enjoy Him forever.
Yeah.
We do not live on this earth forever. So where else do we enjoy Him forever?
Okay, if you have followed the arguments that I have made so far, I have said consistently that if God does not exist and immortality does not exist, life does not have a meaning. It is within the context of immortality
that there's a possibility of enjoying God forever.
Where do immortal people live? Go to where exactly?
That's a dimensional question. You're asking a question of dimension.
Do they go to heaven or not? I mean, if they are
now that
accepted.
is a definitional problem. Definitional in the sense of what you define as heaven.
I'm sorry, I'm going to have to press you. Is it a yes or no? Do good Christians go to heaven or not?
Not good Christians, those that are saved, they go to be with God when they die.
Where exactly do you find God?
If you choose to call that heaven, that's good and fine.
What can you call it hell? Can you call it hell if you choose?
If you choose to call where God lives hell, that's still a grammatical
well,
wherever God is the locus of reality, right? Wherever God dwells, by definition, that is heaven.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, now, can someone who rejects the divinity of Christ attain to heaven?
I want to know the particular bearing that this has got to the subject, which is without God, life has neither meaning nor purpose.
Eventually, we'll come to that. Okay. First things first, yeah.
Okay.
Can someone who rejects Jesus Christ go to heaven?
Somebody who rejects Jesus Christ.
Yes.
God is generous enough that he will not force anybody into a relationship with him who is not interested in relationship.
What is the penalty for rejecting that relationship? Even if it is not forced and it is voluntary.
The penalty is actually a generosity, and it is that those that have said to God, we are not interested, God said to them, you can have it your way.
What if you refuse and you die with the refusal?
That's the point. He doesn't get it. I'm saying that when God says, come to me,
okay,
and then somebody says, I don't want to come.
Yes.
Now, that's so you rejected him. God does not force you into a relationship with himself. God does not force you. God will not torment you to live with him forever.
Are there penalties for that refusal? Is there a punishment for refusing to accept Jesus, however voluntary it is?
I wouldn't immediately want to call it a punishment. And I'm going to explain why. Because I know where all of this is going. If I live in a palace, and that palace is the only inhabitable place in the universe, and for some reason everything is gone down, and my palace is the only inhabitable place in the universe, and I've said to everybody, if you want, you can come live here with me. And you say, we don't want, or you say, I don't want to live with you. Now, you are going to be left outside. Whatever you face outside, if you want to call that punishment, then that's fine. Because let me follow up on that. Hell is everything that heaven is not. Outside of God is everything inside of God is not.
Hell is not a real place with ovens and fire and things like that.
Hell is a real place, but you see the specificities of hell are quite debatable, and the reasons are obvious. There are a lot of symbols that the Bible uses.
All right, thank you. I know the Bible is symbolic. All right, thank you. It's not a literal word of God. It's just symbolism and literature. All right, thank you. That's
an assertion.
Is Allah the same as Yahweh?
Pardon?
Are Allah and Yahweh synonymous?
To the extent that the Muslims' definition and understanding of Allah differs significantly from the Christians' understanding and definition of Yahweh, they are not the same.
Right. So Muhammad was not a prophet of God, of Yahweh, of your God at least? Was Muhammad a prophet of your God?
No, absolutely not.
Okay, so Muhammad was a fake. Because he claims to be a prophet of the only living God.
He claimed to be the prophet of Allah.
Okay, and Allah is not God. All right, thank you, I get it. So Muhammad was a fake. All right, so will Muslims be saved?
The necessary and sufficient requirement for salvation are clearly enunciated in Scripture. Jesus said very clearly, I am the way, the truth, and the life.
So Muslims will not be saved?
Anybody that does not come to the Father through me, nobody can come to the Father except through me. So it's written in black and white.
All right, so 75% of the earth's 7 billion strong population will not be safe. Thank you.
I am afraid you will have to stop your first session here.
All right. Thank you. I really enjoyed that, by the way. And I want to respond to the last thing you said before I ask the question on my own. The question of people getting saved and not getting saved is a very emotionally loaded question. It has more currency emotionally than it does intellectually. It can be considered obnoxious to say that a lot of people go to hell or spend eternity without God, only to the extent that God has actively played a part in making sure that they are kept in the dark. So long as God gives everybody a fair opportunity to spend eternity with Him, and they choose voluntarily to turn down that offer, even if that number that turns down that offer is 99.9% of every human being that ever lived, there is no injustice there. So long as everybody had a chance in order to be with God and they turned it down. It's exactly what the atheist doesn't want that the atheist wants. He wants to have liberty and freedom, and then he turns around and finds fault with God for allowing people to have it their own way. All right, so having said that, I just want to ask, what do you think is the basis for morality? On what basis do you think we can say something is objectively right and something is objectively wrong?
I think the basis for morality really is the consequences, consequentialism as a philosophical theory. If what you do creates harm and a lot of suffering for broad majority of parties involved, then that would be an immoral act. If not, if it creates an ultimate benefit, then it is moral consequentialism.
All right, like I have said, actually on the atheistic worldview, there can be no ultimate value, by the way. So, but if you want to follow consequentialism, it means that you would think it appropriate for the man who is married but cheats serially on his wife and finds a very beautiful way of concealing his lifestyle from his wife. Now, so long as the woman never finds out that the husband was was living in adultery, on your worldview, nothing is morally wrong with what the husband is doing, because consequentially, it doesn't hurt anybody. He takes all the right steps to make sure he doesn't go down with an STD or an STI, provides for his family like they would want to. The wife never gets to suspect.
Well, of course, it is immoral on the part of the wife. Now, on the part of the husband, you cannot hide your wrong actions from your conscience. So he will suffer psychologically, and that is immoral to his psychology and conscience.
All right, so, but you are making an assumption. That's an assumption. You are assuming that you know that...
That he has a conscience? I am assuming that the husband has a conscience.
You are assuming that every human being's conscience will walk in the line that you have said. But of course, we know that there are exceptions. So, to the extent that the conscience does not trouble...
You agreed earlier that morality is innate and inherent.
I said it's objective.
But you said it is inherent. It is in there. You know, it is inborn. It is innate. But it's not something that comes down from the sky as a spirit, right?
But it does not mean that our apprehension of the moral landscape happens at once. There's a gradual apprehending of morality. That's exactly why we have moral progress. So the fact that something is objective, that is innate, does not mean that I know all the morality that I need to know right now, right here. Otherwise, we don't talk about moral progress. But we apprehend the moral landscape gradually, many times, across time, across history. So it could very well be the case that somebody's, maybe by reason of a psychological problem or whatever, it could just be the case, and we know this happens. There are people that commit horrendous evil, the Hitlers of this world, and it does look like they take pleasure in it. If I had the time, I could read for you. Richard Wurmbrand was the man that was kept in communist jail for 14 years for his faith. And when he tells you the kind of statements that the soldiers that kept them in prison, the statements they made because they did not believe God existed.
And they said they have the pleasure of doing whatever they want to do, and they will go scot-free because there's no life after death. These guys don't have the slightest tinge of conscience. So when you follow the consequentialist view in order to establish morality, you are going to run up against a lot of trouble.
Brother Gideon, the opposite, the direct opposite of consequentialism would be divine command theory. If God commands it, then it is morally right. Was it moral for Abraham to commit adultery with Hagar in place of Sarah, since God had commanded it? Was that form of adultery therefore moral?
God commanded what? What did God command?
The Bible fairy tale of Abraham, Hagar, and Isaac. God commanded Abraham to know Hagar.
No, God did not.
Okay.
God did not. You should take a bit. You should take.
I'm afraid this session is over too. We'll have another round for Solomon.
Semantics.
All right, so we can just.
All right, thank you. Now let me just pick up from where we were last. When did the first Christian missionary come to present-day Nigeria?
I don't know the exact figure. It's just close to about 200 years ago.
All right. Was your great-grandfather a Christian? I'm sorry, some of these are a little personal, but I hope you don't mind. Was your great-grandfather a Christian?
Well, my great-grandfather. Yes or no? No, none of them was a Christian.
None of them was a Christian. Are they in heaven or hell?
I am not definitive about their eternal status.
What does the Bible say about people who are not Christians and their fate in the afterlife?
It's not as simplistic as the question you're asking. What the Bible says in Romans 1 and Romans 2 is that everything that can be known of God is made known unto people. There is what we normally call general revelation. God has revealed himself to man in two principal ways, generally and specifically. Generally in nature and in conscience. And Romans 1 and Romans 2 make it very clear that people that died without having knowledge of Jesus Christ are going to be judged on the basis of the light that they had in conscience and in nature. So God is not going to judge anybody on the basis of a personage in history that you are not aware of. But then that does not mean that anybody can come to God without Jesus Christ. What that simply means is that just like men in the Old Testament, like Abraham, like David, like Moses, none of those people knew Jesus. None of them met Jesus. But because they lived with the light that they have, so testimony of Scripture is that God will count it to everybody's account who has lived with the light that he had, the merit of the salvific work of Jesus. So whether you lived in the Old Testament or you lived after Jesus came into the world chronologically, but you had not yet heard about Jesus, God is not going to judge on the basis of criteria that you were helpless about. So that's why exactly I said I'm not sure of the status of my great-grandfather.
All right, thank you. Now, what is your opinion concerning the Jews who lived with Jesus and rejected him as a fake?
It's not different from what I said earlier. Okay. John 14, verse 6.
Okay. Because the Jews lived with Jesus in the flesh, and in their opinion, this guy was fake. You know, he didn't suitably fulfill the requirements of the Messiah they had been promised.
Exactly.
Then what gives you a right and what gives you greater moral authority to believe in a man who died 2,000 years ago, while the people who are contemporaries of his thought he was a fake? He was not the genuine article.
All right, that is a very unfair generalization. The earliest missionaries of the Christian faith were Jews.
A minority.
Okay, so is it a democracy? Is that how you arrive at truth?
because you made a good statement that the Jews rejected him as a faith, and I'm saying that
Judaism as a worldview, as an organized religion, is premised on the rejection of this so-called Christian Messiah who surfaced somewhere in Palestine.
It's not, because Judaism predates Jesus.
But does Judaism exist today?
It does.
Okay, now does the Judaism that exists today precede Jesus rather than predate him?
It's a continuity of
It's a continuity. Now,
Moses.
Jesus was supposed to be the next phase of Judaism. When he came into the picture, they rejected him. They said, this is a fake. That means the Judaism that exists today actually rejects Jesus. And it is not separate from the one that predates Jesus, like you said.
What is the true value of the acceptance or rejection of the Jews with respect to Jesus? What's the truth value? What does it add to the reality and the objectivity of who Jesus truly was? Is again dogmatic. So let me ask you a question. If all the Jews had believed in Jesus, would you have been a Christian today? Because that's where you see.
I'm not a Christian today.
Yeah, so that's what I'm asking. But I'm saying that if all the Jews became Christians today, would that not give you conviction that, oh, indeed, Jesus is the Messiah? Therefore,
no, if the Jews had accepted Jesus, because Jesus indeed had been sent specifically for the Jews, the rest of us were barbarians, heathens, were supposed to be wiped out by the loving Father who created all of us. Had the Jews accepted Jesus, the rest of us would be wiped out as heathens and Gentiles and non-godless people.
Can I get a reference for that? I need a reference for that.
Okay, what is Judaism premised on? Why had Jesus been sent originally?
I'm afraid this session is over.
All right, thank you. Because I'm really enjoying this, I want to give him my 5 minutes. I want him to continue the question. I just so you can go. Yeah, it's my 5 minutes. You can ask. Now, so I can answer that question. Then you can ask any follow-up question. Judaism is premised on the Mosaic system. What a lot of people do not understand is that whereas the Mosaic system, which is what we now call the Old Testament or the Old Covenant, whereas chronologically, the realization of that covenant came before the covenant that is represented in Jesus. In time, the giving of the covenant, when God came to Abraham, God was not looking for just a nation. God said to Abraham, in your seed, all the families of the earth were going to be blessed.
Does this include the Canaanites who were wiped out by Joshua's armies?
It's the story of the Canaanites is a story that you need to understand in its context.
Were the Canaanites wiped out man, woman, child by Joshua's army upon the command of Jehovah?
Yes.
Were they the seed of Abraham?
They were not.
So then who is the seed of Abraham?
Now, if you took some care to follow that narrative, you know, sometimes I find it interesting that a lot of non-Christians who claim to have understood Christianity and have rejected it actually haven't taken the time to understand what they have rejected. In the book of Galatians, the scriptures are very clear that when God made a promise to Abraham that in your seed the families of the earth will be blessed, scriptures are very particular that it is not seeds as to many, but seed as to one. And that seed, in context for Abraham, was Isaac, and ultimately it was Jesus. And that's why Jesus said he came as a fulfillment of that which God had promised. So the seed that God was making a promise to in Abraham is not different from the seed that God was talking about in Genesis when he said that the seed of the woman. It is the story of that seed that finds its full expression in the person of Jesus Christ. So that's the seed.
All right, thank you for that cheap shot. You can clap again.
If you have any problem with that, you still have my 5 minutes.
Okay, yeah. All right. Another question. I'd like to take this into different territory. Is God in charge of the world today?
God is sovereign, yes.
Okay, so does he know everything that will happen before it happens?
Yeah, he does.
Okay. Did he create Satan?
God created the being that we call Satan.
Alright, did he know that the being that we call Satan would rebel?
Yeah, he does. He
Okay,
does.
so he knew that Satan would rebel.
Yeah.
All right, and he knew that Satan would therefore come and corrupt mankind.
Yeah, he knew.
Okay, and then he allowed people to be born and to be created knowing that they would be corrupted by Satan and burning in hell forever.
Very much so.
Wow, what a loving God.
Alright, no, I need to respond to that now. So now let me respond to that. On what basis do you have a problem with that? What is the moral?
The fact that I was created.
Let me ask you a question. Let me say something. You are saying that God does not have a right. God does not have a right to know everything that he knows about the universe and still allow it to exist. By so saying, you are simply saying that the rights of the people that will not believe in Jesus and consequently spend eternity without God should override the joy and the enjoyment that God intends to have from those that will willingly accept Jesus and spend eternity with him. Now, on what basis do you think you can decide for God what kind of world he should actualize?
I'm actually disappointed in God. He's a dictator. It should be me that's disappointed. I mean, if as a father, I fail to fend for my children and I beat them and rape them and torture them and subject them to all manner of inhuman and cruel and brutal treatment, then the children have a right to either wake up in the night and rebel against me and dispatch me to the next world or disown me as their father because I am failing in my duty as their father, especially if I claim to be synonymous with love. Now, the God's other name is agape, which means love.
I think you are completely misunderstanding what is going on here. God does not maltreat anybody. God does not. I don't even know all the words he have used. They don't define the God of the scripture.
But how can
God
you say that when you
sovereign.
just say he created Satan and he knew what Satan's purpose was?
I said he created the being that we call Satan. By that I mean that he did not create the being that we know Satan as Satan. Everywhere
But
that
he
you
knew
have
that this
will.
being would eventually become corrupt.
Yes, he knew.
So he created an immature Satan who eventually matured.
Alright, so thank you very much.
All right. Could this get any better? Thank you very much, Manzi. Manzi, a true son of the soil. Thank you very much, Gideon. I like to say a true son of the soil too.
That's generous.
I will take two questions from the audience. I will only take a question for Gideon and a question for Surumani. So if you're putting up your hand, you better ask. So the first person who asks, if they ask Gideon, the next person must ask Manzi. I'll take Godwin Toko at the back.
Can I speak from here? Yes. My question goes to Gideon. I mean to Odoma. Yeah, it's the same. So I want to know more about, you say like life without God, life without Jesus, and life without Christianity is meaningless. What is the purpose? What is that purpose? Can you tell us more about that purpose? And the problem is, all your life you've been a Christian. So how do you know that they that are not Christians are living a purposeless life, that they don't have any meaning in their lives? Because you've never been there in the first place. So then the next thing is
One question.
one question.
I think you should ask the next question because this question is being answered.
Yeah.
So let's make very good use of it.
The next one.
Yeah.
You say there is someday the world won't exist.
Yeah.
There is no evidence to that effect because it has always existed. Unless you're going to believe in science, science contradicts God.
Wow, that's a new one. I haven't heard that. There's no serious Christian that believes in what you're saying. When I stood here, I said to you that the scientific evidence tells us that our universe began to exist about 13 billion years ago. I wasn't quoting Genesis or Mark. And I said to you that the scientific evidence also tells us that our universe someday is going to die, which Manzi has also supported, all right? So I'm not making any argument from, I don't know why you think it's not compatible with the word of the Bible. In my Bible, the Bible does say that in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. In the science, it says that there's a big bang. In the Bible, it does say that the universe will come to an end. In the science, it did say the same thing. So I don't even see the contradiction. So yes, it's scientific fact that the universe will wound up someday and it won't be anymore.
So the next question will be for Manzi. A very controversial man in this house, one that I know to carry the greatest sense of controversy. Louis Namwanja Chizito.
My question goes to Manzi, but I'm just going to juxtapose it with what I was supposed to ask you. So Manzi, we have known each other for some time, and I think we have discussed this. Now,
Don't make it any easier.
now my question is, I want you to help me make a clear distinction between life without God in these two aspects. Let me define them: morality and ethics. These are two different fields. You see, with morality, it's how you treat people you know. Morality, morals are how you treat people you know. For instance, my father, my mother, my friends, who I have a rapport with. Now, ethics on the other side are how I treat people actually I do not know. Necessarily, I have no rapport with. For instance, a non-citizen, how he's treated in Uganda, you see. Now, my question is, without the concept of God, without the concept of the evangelical intent of life, how then do you define ethics without God?
Okay, maybe those for that question. Perhaps I'll just sneak in one related to Gideon's question. The Bible actually says the earth is 6,000 years old. Just suppose that against 13.6 billion.
Passage, the reference?
Well, I'm not a walking Bible, but I could quote the scripture. But it says it actually dates the earth to 6,000 years old.
I want to say straight away that you won't find that evidence in scripture. It's not in scripture.
Okay, very well. Now let me respond. Let me respond to Louis's question. Okay, the dilemma regarding ethics, morality, I think it's a bit of a semantic issue there, ethics and morality. The definitions that you gave may be technical, perhaps limited to legal jurisprudence or something. But morality in the context of a broad, overarching, more superseding framework of things is really just about being able to distinguish good from evil, or righteousness from unrighteousness, so to speak. So in that context, then, how do we account for morality? Excuse me for a few. How do you account for morality in the absence of a dictator living in heaven, of a long bearded white man with blue eyes and flaxen hair in the clouds? How do you accept the existence of a